Good evening. We're going to ask everyone to find a little bit of a seat. I am going to ask that if you are sitting, well, everybody's sitting in a row. If you can move toward the center of the row so that we don't have one random seat. So if people are coming in later, they don't have to climb over you and can find somebody to sit with the person they love. Thank you very much for joining us this evening. Today marks 23 years since September 11th, when 3,000 innocent lives were lost in brutal acts of terrorism. And it's been nearly a full year since 1,200 innocent lives were lost in brutal acts of terrorism. Their memory, and the memory of so many innocent people lost before and since, lives on, not only in the hearts of their loved ones, but also in the collective consciousness of all who cherish freedom and democracy. And I think that all of us here can agree that we cherish freedom and democracy. In that light, I am so pleased to welcome you this evening for a conversation that I've had the pleasure of hearing several times in the past. In a moment, I will invite up Noor Awad and Rav Hanan Schlesinger of the Roots Shorashim Judor program. Roots is a unique binational initiative with a network of Israelis and Palestinians who have come to see each other as partners who both need to make changes to end their conflict. Roots' mission is to enhance dialogue, transformation, and bridge building, and it is based on a mutual recognition of each people's connection to the land. Roots is about developing understanding and solidarity despite ideological differences. Roots is a place where local peoples can take responsibility. Their work is aimed at challenging the assumptions their communities hold about each other, building trust, and creating a new discourse around the conflict in their respective societies. This is a grassroots and local model for making change from the bottom up. As a Jew, as a rabbi here in Portland, and as an Israeli, I believe that hard conversations are what we need to have. And we'll hear one today. And it's one that has been done beautifully. It's one that I hope we can open our hearts and our minds to listen to learn from, and then think together in the memory of those who should not have lost their lives and in the hopes of a better tomorrow. And let us remember, if these gentlemen who have every reason to not sit together can do so, then so can we. Please welcome Noor and Hanan.
Not working.
Oh, on the bottom? Did the light go on? Nope. No. Hold it down for a second till the light goes on. It's the first test. I just tested it.
Magic touch. Magic touch.
There we go. Okay.
Good evening, everyone, and really thank you very much for coming here this evening. Noor and I are here to offer solutions. Social solutions, educational solutions, and also political solutions. We're not here to accuse. We're not here to criticize. We're not here to lament or to complain. We're here to light a candle in the darkness. Hopefully that candle will help illumine us in our way forward. A lot has changed for the worse since October 7th. But one thing has not changed at all, and that is the deep connection of Palestinians and Israelis both to the land. And that's not going to change. No one is going anywhere. Both sides are deeply connected to that tiny land. And that means that we are destined or doomed, Israelis and Palestinians, to spend generations together, living together or dying together. Many believe that we are doomed to keep killing each other. Noor and I, and Roots in general, thinks differently. We're here tonight to show a model of what a better future might look like and the way to get there. Noor and I both come from the West Bank. It's a little piece of land in which Israelis and Palestinians live very, very, very close together, but very far apart. Close together geographically, but far apart in every other sense of the word. You see, we speak different languages. You knew that. We have different cultures. You knew that. Different religions. You knew that. Did you know that Israeli Jews and Palestinian Arabs in the West Bank have separate, completely separate transportation systems? Did you know we have different health systems and educational systems? Did you know that the Israelis and Palestinians living very, very close to each other live under different legal systems with different sets of rights and obligations? Under those circumstances, living so close together but so far apart, of course there's going to be ignorance of the other side, and prejudice, and bigotry, misunderstandings, of course, and lots of resentment, hate, and fear. And if that's not enough of the bad news, I have more. There's no common ground. But I don't mean that as a metaphor. I mean the ground that our chairs and our legs are sitting on. Because Israeli military law that rules the West Bank, rules my life and Noor's life, forbids Israeli Jews from entering Palestinian areas and forbids Palestinians from entering Israeli Jewish areas, which means, had Noor and I wanted to have a cup of coffee together someplace there in the West Bank, and of course Noor is forbidden to leave the West Bank, it's the only place he can be. If we wanted to have a cup of coffee together, there's no place to do it. It's illegal to have a cup of coffee together for Noor and I in 95% of the cases in the West Bank, perhaps much more than 95%. And that was true until 10.5 years ago. 10.5 years ago, we, Roots, created the only joint Israeli-Palestinian community center in the whole West Bank, the only joint space. It's a community center, like a community center any place around the world. There's social activities, there's educational activities, interfaith dialogue, youth groups, summer camp, day camp, photography workshops, music, therapy, etc., etc., etc. In our center, it's called the Dignity Center, people who've never, ever, ever met the other side and were never an opportunity to meet the other side, they come with all their hesitations, with all their fear, with all their reticence, they come. You see people sitting on different sides of the room, Israelis here, Palestinians here. You may have a Palestinian or an Israeli who's nudging his neighbor, why did you bring me? Or look at them, they're going to kill me. The first stage is to break the ice and begin the process of humanization. And you know what? You discover they're pretty much like me. I can talk to them. And you know what? It's a little bit surprising that they're human beings. And I'm a little bit embarrassed and I'm surprised, but I'm still surprised. The humanization is difficult, getting over the demonization, but it's not the most difficult thing we do. The most difficult thing we do is the next stage. After you have discovered that that woman on the other side of the room that you just met is actually a human being, then you begin to grapple with the fact that she is the bearer of a national, political, cultural, religious identity that contradicts yours. That what she thinks about herself is very different than what I think about her. And what she thinks about me is really different than what I think about myself. To come to terms with the fact that what she thinks about herself may actually be true, and what she thinks about me, actually all might have some legitimacy to it. That's really, really, really difficult. That's the process of identity reconciliation that is so central to the work of Roots. Now, why is it so difficult? Well, I want to give a name to the difficulty. I claim that Israelis and Palestinians both are sick in the heart. This heart disease has a name. It's a virus coursing through our veins, and I call it the hubris of exclusivity. The hubris of exclusivity infects me with the notion that my people are real and their people are fake. My connection to the land is legitimate and theirs is fabricated. And what happens in the activities of Roots and the Dignity Center, and not always, and not completely, and not immediately, but sometimes and very gradually, slowly, is that we begin a process of healing from the hubris of exclusivity to come to a place of the humility of multiplicity. And that's really, really difficult. It means that the Dignity Center is not just a community center, it's a mental health clinic. And we've seen again and again and again that process of overcoming sickness and coming to a place of healing, of being a better Jew, a better Muslim, a better Christian, and a better human being. Roots was founded 10.5 years ago, and I want to show you a very short video. It's 2.5 minutes from the first year and a half, 2 years of Roots. It's a trailer of a movie that was made about us. It's called The Field, and you'll see there Ali Abu Awad, the founder of Roots, who later became my mentor and my rabbi, as he grapples with the idea of Roots. Lights.
אנחנו נמצאים כאן באדמה של המשפחה שלי. כשבאתי לכאן והחלטתי להקים מרכז פלסטיני שלי אלימות, אני מצפה שיתקפו אותי גם בחברה שלי וגם באוכלוסייה של המתנחלים. אבל אני יודע, כל עוד שאנחנו לא מדברים עם הימין, השמאל לא יעשה שלום.
The first time I had heard someone talk about being in Israeli jail, someone talking about suffering under occupation.
זה שאני מכבד אותך, זה הכבוד שאני מכבד את עצמי כשאני מסתכל על עצמי בראי.
We believe that religion has to be part of the solution.
אללהו אכבר. אדוני הוא האלוהים.
יהודים ניצודים בארץ ישראל כמו חיות, ממש. פשוט צדים אותם. צדים אותם. רואים רכב, איפה הם? איפה השותף? איפה האח?
אתה יושב על הכלכלה שלי, אתה יושב על הבית שלי, אתה יושב על הלב שלי, אבל לא כשותף.
האם אתה מוכן להודות שהישיבה שלך פה היא ישיבה של פשע? וממילא תגיד לי מבחינה פוליטית.
The Jewish people, that we own this land? We don't own this land. We belong to this land. And the Palestinian people also belong to this land.
אנחנו האחרונים בעולם שצריך לשבת אחד עם השני. באתי לבקש לדרוש איתה מחברי. מפני שאת ואני סבלנו שלא חיפשנו את זה לפני.
Go back to the map. I've said about myself many times that I'm a Jew, and I'm a Zionist, and I'm a settler. When I say I'm a Jew, I'm not talking about the Jewish religion. I'm a religious Jew, but Jew comes before religious. When I say I'm a Jew, I'm talking about peoplehood. I'm talking about the Jewish people. The sense that we are an extended family. We're all connected throughout the generations. We were born with Abram and Sarah and their children. Their children had children. We became a tribe, then the 12 tribes of Israel. The family grew. We're connected horizontally and vertically, all the Jews. But we're not connected just to our fellow Jews. Every Jew knows that there's some type of deep connection between the land of Israel and the people of Israel. And because of that deep connection, that sometimes we have a problem defining and we can even argue over it, but because of that deep connection between the people and the land, I can, from my perspective, move from talking about myself as a Jew to talking about myself as a Zionist. For me, it's a natural, smooth progression. My Zionism is built as the second story of my Judaism. Zionism, as you know, is the national liberation movement of the Jewish people. It's brought home, since 1870, 1880, over 3 million Jews. And one of them is standing right here. I was born in New York, not in Israel and not in Portland. When I was 18, I made Aliyah, which means I ascended to land, got on the plane with my 2 bags, and I came home. And I fulfilled the dreams of 2 millennia of Jews. In the 70 of the Common Era, the Romans destroyed the Second Jewish Commonwealth. Our people, our kings, our rabbis, our leaders, judges were exiled, sent to the Middle East, to Northern Africa. Later we made it to Europe, Australia, America. And throughout these years, these 2,000 years, we're yearning and hoping and praying, L'Shana Abba B'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem, to come home. Jews have had a sense, until very recently, that we're not at home, we're in limbo. We are in exile. And to come home for me was a very, very powerful thing. After I said I'm a Jew, and I said I'm a Zionist, I said I'm a settler, which means I live in the West Bank. You have the map there. The West Bank is in the blue or the gray. The line separating Israel proper in the orange from the West Bank is the dotted line, the green line. A settler is an Israeli Jew. Israeli citizenship moves over the green line into the West Bank. I want to make it clear that for certain, being a settler, an Israeli Jew living in the West Bank, has deep political implications. We'll talk about that later. But the point is that when I made Aliyah and I came immediately to the West Bank, it wasn't because of politics, but it was because of history. What do I mean by that? I mean, if I've come home after 2,000 years, I want to come home to the cradle of Jewish civilization. I want to come home to where we were born, where we have our roots, where we have our history, where you can open up the Bible and read the verses and walk in the footsteps of what you're reading. I wanted to be where we have our archaeology, where you can scratch the ground with your heel and come up with pottery that our ancestors left 2,000 years ago. That pottery speaks to me. It says, you're part of me. There's a continuity here. There's connection. So I moved there because of history. And for the same reason that I moved there, I usually don't call it the West Bank. I call it Judea and Samaria. And I know that sounds like a political statement, but I call it Judea and Samaria, again, for history, because that's what the Jewish people have called it for the past 2,500 years. The land above Jerusalem to the north is called Samaria, because that's what the Bible calls it. Right? It's the kingdom of Samaria, of Israel, of the 10 tribes. And south of Jerusalem, where I live, was the kingdom of Judea. The tribe of Judea inherited there. So I call it what I call it for the same reason I live there, because of the sense of historical continuity, of coming home, of continuing to write the book of Jewish history, where it all began. And then 10.5 years ago, I began to realize that in a certain sense, I don't really know what I'm talking about. And I don't mean that everything I just said was false. But I do mean that everything I just said was only half true. I lived for over 40 years of my life as if half of the truth was the whole truth. I had never met a Palestinian until 10.5 years ago. I lived as if the Palestinians didn't exist. They were like the gray, drab scenery that passes in the background of the Jewish movie, my movie. Not part of the plot. You could safely ignore them. They were transparent and I was blind. I lived as if there was only one story in that land. And then, through meeting Palestinians, I began to learn that there are 2 stories in that land. And today I believe that if you mistake half of the truth for the whole truth, then you're very close to falsehood. And that's not a place that I want to be any longer. So how did this happen to me? I'm driving my car 10.5 years ago. I had with me 2 Protestant evangelical pastors from the US. They were old friends of mine. They, as evangelicals, know the Bible, believe in the Bible, the same prophets that we Jews know and believe in: Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, Zechariah. They knew the prophecies that after a long, hard exile, the daughters and sons of the land would return someday. And they believed, like I believe, that it's happening in front of our eyes. They wanted to feel it through me. So I showed them around where I live in Judea, in the area of Gush Etzion. I showed them as we're driving the roads we paved, and the forests we planted, and the buildings, the institutions, the settlements that we've constructed. And as we're driving, I picked up a hitchhiker, a young man who was on the side of the road with his finger out. Drove a little bit and picked up another hitchhiker. After a few minutes, the two young men asked to get out of the car. I stopped, let them off, started to drive again. Then one of the pastors from Dallas, Texas, said to me the following words: Hanan, you just taught us a lesson in Jewish ethics. Thank you very much. We've never seen that before. No one in Dallas picks up hitchhikers. So I said to them, you know, it's not just me. Around here, we all pick up hitchhikers. We have a common mission. We trust each other. And just like everyone else, I said, I do my best to pick up every person who puts out his finger for a ride. And by the time I finished that sentence, it dawned on me that I was lying. I was lying to Bob and Kevin, and actually I was also lying to myself. I said, and I believe that I pick up every person, but you guys know that what I should have said is, I pick up every Jew. I'd never picked up a Palestinian in my life, even though they're 85% of the population. They're walking on the side of the road in the hot sun, baskets on their head, carrying children. So how did I make that mistake? How did I say I pick up every person? Clearly, either I didn't see the Palestinians or I didn't see them as significant human beings. And I felt at that moment naked, exposed in front of my clergy colleagues. We started to talk about it. And I came to the conclusion that there is inside me a blemish, a moral blemish. I have to find a way to fix it. I have to find a way to turn the Palestinians to human beings in my eyes. And the way to do it, I knew then, is to meet them. So that's how my journey began. I took upon myself to meet Palestinians. It didn't go well at the beginning. It was extremely difficult. It took weeks, I think it took months. Finally, in a way that I don't have time to describe, I got invited to meet my Palestinian neighbors. It is now the last Wednesday of January 2014. I'm sitting on the sofa in my living room, in my home, in Alon Shvut. That's the settlement I live in. I got up from the sofa, walked to the front door, put my hand on the doorknob, opened the door, put 1 foot over the threshold. My wife called behind me, "Where are you going?" So I said, "I'm going to meet Palestinians." And that's when all hell broke loose. So my wife starts to scream, "What do you mean meet Palestinians? They'll kill you." I came back in the house. I approached my wife. I saw the terror in her eyes. She begged me not to go. I told her I had to do this. I walked again to the door, opened it, put both feet across the threshold. When I closed the door behind me, I remember saying to myself, perhaps my wife is right. Perhaps they will kill me. So my heart is pounding. I'm really afraid. I didn't get in the car. I had a map that told me more or less where to go. It was about a 23-minute walk, and I found myself going through the gate at the entrance, that piece of Palestinian farmland that you saw in the film. There was nothing there, no buildings, very few trees, but then I saw something I'd never, ever seen before. I saw 15 Israelis and 15 Palestinians doing the strangest thing. They were talking to each other in little groups, 2 over here, 3 over here. I saw a Palestinian woman who's standing alone. She's dressed in brown from head to toe, only her face is visible, clearly an observant Muslim. So I walked right up to her and said hello. We talked in English a minute or two. And then I said to her, "I can't believe I'm talking to you." And she said to me, "I can't believe I'm talking to you because we don't talk to Israeli settlers." I had no idea why she said we don't talk to Israeli settlers. In any case, she kept talking, it was fine. The conversation was short because her son walked over and she introduced me. She told me his name is Yazin and he's 17 years old. So Yazin and I shake hands, we begin to talk, and I see he's wearing a windbreaker, and on the jacket are 3 words in English, "Seeds of Peace." It's from your state, Seeds of Peace. But if there's anyone in the audience who doesn't know what Seeds of Peace is, don't ask your neighbor. I want to keep some suspense here. So I look at the jacket, it has the word peace on it. And I look at Yazin, he's a Palestinian. And I say to myself, this can't be. Why would a Palestinian wear a jacket with the word peace on it? Perhaps he doesn't know what it means. Perhaps someone gave him the jacket. So jokingly, I said to Yazin, what's the Seeds of Peace thing? I thought he'd said, I don't know. Someone gave me the jacket. That's not what he said. He told me that Seeds of Peace is the name of a summer camp in Maine, USA, that takes Israeli kids and Palestinian kids out of the conflict zone for a summer of recreation and reconciliation. He said he just spent the whole summer in the camp, had a great time, met Israeli kids, now they're friends on Facebook. That was back when kids were on Facebook. And then he told me that he was so changed by meeting Israelis that now he wants to spend some of his life building bridges of peace between our two peoples. And I remember looking at Yazin and listening and not knowing if I can believe what he's saying, because it contradicted everything but everything that I know to be true. And you could say that Sadia, his mother, and Yazin were the first two Palestinians that began the process of deeply unsettling me. His father walks over. Jamal's a stocky guy, swarthy, only a little bit taller than me. And truth be told, he looked to me Palestinian, which means he looked to me dangerous. We shook hands. He asked me my name. I told him. He told me his name, Jamal Mukbil. Where are you from, Hanan? I said, Alon Shvut. Jamal, where are you from? Beit Umar. Beit Umar? He said those two words, I had half of a heart attack. Because I know Beit Umar, it's a Palestinian city of 23,000 Palestinians. It's about a 7-8 minute drive south from where I live on the way to Hebron. I've driven on that road hundreds, perhaps thousands of times. I was ambushed in the middle of the night once. Another time, middle of the day, my wife and kids are in the car. The rocks are coming from this side and that side. The windshield is breaking. The car is rocking. Everyone's screaming. Another time, I have a friend who was gunned down on that road, a doctor at Hadassah Hospital, coming home from work late at night. So I know the people in Beit Umar, they're terrorists. Now it turns out I'm talking to these people, Sadia, Yazin, Jamal. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world for me. Jamal starts telling me how he got to this peace gathering of Israelis and Palestinians. He told me, Hanan, you know, there's no Jews in Beit Umar. Okay. But there are, he said, the Jewish soldiers that guard the entrance to the city. They make life miserable for us. They prevent us from going in and out. We hate them. And since they're the only Jews we know, we hate, by extension, all Jews. No one in Beit Umar would want to have a social relationship with a Jew. But he told me many years ago, he had a friend from Jericho, not from Beit Umar. And the friend said, you know, Jamal, every once in a while, I go to a dialogue group between Israelis and Palestinians. Why don't you join me? And Jamal told me, I told my friend, I'm never ever coming with you. That's only for the weak people and traitors. A proud Palestinian does not go to meet the enemy. But the friend wouldn't take no for an answer, and month after month he's trying to convince Jamal. So eventually Jamal said, okay already, I'll come with you. They sat in a room, a circle, Israelis and Palestinians. Jamal said he didn't participate, he sat in the corner, but he listened. And at one point, Jamal said, one of the Jewish men got up from the chair he was sitting in and looked at me. That made me really uptight. He started to walk towards me. I was afraid what he's going to do to me. He came right up to me and forced me to shake his hand. And then he asked me questions. I had to answer them. We had this very uncomfortable conversation. And when he finally walked away, Jamal said, I ran to the bathroom to wash the filth off my hand from touching a Jew. And I vowed never to come back to this cursed place. Jamal went home and told his wife. She agreed it was a big mistake to go there. And what has to happen now is, 1, never tell anyone in Beit Umar you were there. Number 2, never go back. But Jamal's friend had other plans, and I don't know how it happened, but the next month, Sadia and Jamal together found themselves in that same room in Jericho. And the month after, they became part of the group, regular members. And Jamal looks at me and says, Hanan, where I thought there was only an enemy, I discovered a human being who turned out to be a partner. And that changed me. And just like I felt when I was listening to his son, so now, I did not know if I can believe what he's saying, because it just doesn't make any sense. It cannot be. And I'm getting more and more unsettled and confused and challenged. Jamal tells me another story. Hanan, there's lots of little kids in Beit Umar. Okay, 5 years old, 7 years old. Hanan, when those kids see someone who looks like you, they start to cry. I said, what do they start to cry? And he was flustered by the fact that I didn't understand. As if it's obvious. Look at me, you start to cry. He said, Hanan, it's the kippah you have on your head, and it's the beard and the tzitzit. Because people who dress like you walk into Beit Umar with their submachine guns and they kill the kids. By the way, parenthetically, today that's actually true. Back then, 10 years ago, I thought that was a blood libel. That's borderline anti-Semitic, I said to myself. And I have to tell him off and to explain to him that just doesn't happen. And I'm flying into a rage inside. I'm about to yell at him. And then I realized that this is a moment of blessing. Because for the first time in my life, I'm experiencing how the other experiences me. And that can be a blessing if I'm able to contain the experience and not lash out at him in rage. So I decided to hold myself back to try and think, what can I say to him? And before a word came out of my mouth, I had a vision of my 2 grown sons and my son-in-law walking in the fields around my house in Alon Shvut with their children, my grandchildren, and of course the 3 young Jewish fathers are all carrying pistols like all the other Jewish men of that age. And I suddenly realized that those guns must be frightening to little Palestinian kids. So I said to Jamal, what do you want? We carry guns because we're afraid of you. And he looked at me as if I fell from the moon. He said, no, you're not afraid of us. It can't be because we're afraid of you. And there was such a moment of confusion. They're really afraid of us? Why are they afraid of us? We're peace-loving people. We don't use those guns. They're just for self-defense. And I'm getting more and more undone in this conversation with Jamal. I just don't understand what's going on here. We sat in a circle later as the sun's going down, Israelis and Palestinians. And Ali Abu Awad, who you saw in the clip, the owner of the piece of land we were convening on and the Palestinian convener of that get-together, Ali got up to talk in perfect Hebrew that it turns out he learned for many, many years in Israeli jail. He said, my name is Ali Abu Awad. I'm from a proud Palestinian family. For generations we lived in Kubeba. And I said to myself, what's Kubeba? Never heard of it. In 1948, he said, during the war, we had to leave our village. Later, he said, the Jews, the Israelis, turned Kubeba into Lachish. And I, of course, know where Lachish is, half-hour drive towards the Mediterranean from my home. He said that the clan scattered. Some went to Jordan, some to Europe. And many, many members of the clan went to Beit Umar. He said they lived there from 48 to 67 under the Jordanian occupation. Then in 1967, again, war with the Jews. And since then, he said, we Palestinians in Beit Umar and all over the West Bank find ourselves living under the rigors and the suffering and the injustice of the Israeli occupation. Israeli occupation, he said? That was the first time in my life that I'd heard a human being use those 2 words in my presence. I had no idea what he's talking about. Now, of course, I'd read in the newspaper and I heard on the radio the European Union, United Nations, always condemning the Israeli occupation. But I had no idea what they were talking about. Where could this thing be? Because when I drive on the roads of Samaria, when I walk in the fields of Judea, I don't see occupation. I see the return of the Jewish people, my people, to our ancient homeland after 2,000 years of exile. What could be more righteous than that? We've come home. And Ali Abu Awad now is telling us about the Israeli occupation, about suffering under occupation, about lack of rights, about injustice. He said his mother was a leader of the nonviolent, that's what he said, nonviolent First Intifada, giving out pamphlets and organizing strikes. He said the Israeli soldiers came into the house in the middle of the night and beat her up in front of his eyes. It happened a second and third time until she was taken to jail, he said, for 6 years. And then a year or 2 passed and Ali finds himself arrested and sentenced, he said, to 10 years in jail and never told the charges in the secret file against him. I want to get up and say, Ali, you're a liar. We don't do things like that. That can't be. But I didn't get up to say he's a liar because he wasn't trying to convince us of anything. He was just telling the story of his life very, very calmly. And I was churning inside. I went home and I remember pacing back and forth in my study, feeling so nauseous that I have to bend down and pick my stomach up and put it back in because everything is in conflict inside. What was he talking about? He said he lives in Palestine. Where's this Palestine thing? I went back a short while later to find Ali and ask him some questions. And then other Israelis joined, and Jamal came, and we were 3 Palestinians and 3 Israelis. And a week later, we were 5 and 5. And 2 weeks later, we were 10 and 10. The weeks became months, became years. We grew to 15 and 15, and then hundreds and hundreds of people. We founded Roots in the Dignity Center. What we did during those first weeks and months of years of Roots was not dialogue. It was stories. Telling stories and listening to stories. The Palestinians told us the stories of who they are. And it was very, very hard to listen because their stories contradict our stories. And we told them our stories, our Jewish Israeli stories of history, of belonging to the land. And it was very, very hard for the Palestinians to listen because our stories contradict their stories. We listened until it hurt, and then we listened some more. We didn't argue. We listened in great consternation and pain, sometimes feeling we're traitors for listening anymore to these ridiculous falsehoods, sometimes feeling we want to run away and not come back, sometimes we want to get up and shout, but by and large we didn't run away, we didn't get up and shout. We listened until it hurt, and we listened some more. It was very, very hard. And here are some of the conclusions we came to after months and years of telling stories and listening to stories. Ali Abu Awad, almost from the outset, told us that what you Jews think about Palestinians is true. Yes, he said, most Palestinians go to sleep at night dreaming that the Jews will disappear from the land tomorrow, because the Palestinians know that the Jews don't belong. And just like the Algerians forced the French from Algeria, so we Palestinians will fight hard and long enough, and the Jews will get the message they don't belong, and they'll go. It was really, really hard to hear Ali say that that's what over 80% of his friends and neighbors and fellow Palestinians believe. But you know what? We Jews had to admit that we go to sleep at night with the exact same dream that the Palestinians will disappear tomorrow, because we know they don't belong. It's our land, not theirs, and we'll hold on long enough, make it hard enough for them, and eventually they'll leave. Ali and the Palestinians said to us, but we have no other place to go. And we Jews said to the Palestinians that we have no other place to go. So what happens when you hear the other side's stories of belonging to the land again and again and again? You realize, yeah, we have been living our lives, both us and them, on the basis of an illusion that eventually we'll be here without them. But they're not going anywhere, and we're not going anywhere. Both sides are deeply connected to the land. Both sides are going to fight to the last drop of blood. And it blows your mind. It fries your brain when you realize that you have to now reconfigure everything you've thought about the past, the present, and the future, because we always thought of us without them, but it's not going to happen. That's very, very difficult. We also slowly came to the realization that Palestinians and Israelis both construct their identities upon the erasure of the other side's identity. Both sides are certain that we can tell them who they are. You know what the Palestinians say about us Jews? They say, Jew, very nice. The Quran greatly respects Judaism, but it's a religion, it's a faith. It's not a people. It's not a nation. You don't need land, so go back to Russia where you came from. And then what do the Jews say to the Palestinians? They say, Palestinian, oh, you know it's not true. You're making it up. No such thing as a Palestinian state. Never was. You're just Arab. So go back to Saudi Arabia you came from. Why did you come to take our land? But after you listen to the side stories again and again and again, stories of belonging, stories of connection to the land, stories of connection to their people, you realize you know nothing about who they are. You can't tell them who they are. You have to listen and let them tell who they are, and they may listen when you tell who you are. And during these processes of listening hard, so hard, people begin that process of healing that I talked about earlier, that transformation of moving from a one-story consciousness, a one-truth consciousness, to a two-story, a two-truth consciousness. That I'm a Jew, I'm a Zionist, I'm deeply connected to Judea and Samaria, my identity is glorious, but that does not mean that their identity, the Palestinian identity, is any less true. I said earlier, jokingly, but it's really not a joke, that Ali Abu Awad became my mentor. And Ali says it like this: we have to find a way to fit two truths into one heart. Two truths into one heart, that's the only way to fit the two peoples into one land. Another way to say the same thing, and this comes from my mentor and colleague, Rabbi Brad Hirschfeld: you don't have to be wrong for me to be right. A lot of Israelis and Palestinians, by the way, Democrats and Republicans in this country as well, think that if you are right, then I'm wrong, so you better be wrong, and I'll spend all my energy proving that you're wrong. But it doesn't work that way. It's not a zero-sum game. The Palestinians can be right, and the Israeli Jews can be right as well. You don't have to be wrong for me to be right. I want to move to the last part of my talk. There's going to be 3 points, and then a 4th culminating point, and then 3 other points. The first point: there is such a thing as the Palestinian people. That's really hard for most Israelis to accept. And that point has a corollary. There is such a thing as the Jewish people. That's really hard for most Palestinians to accept. Point number 2: there is such a thing as the land of Palestine. That's really hard for most Israeli Jews to accept. Corollary of point number 2: there is such a thing as the historical land of Israel. That's really hard for most Palestinians to accept. Point number 3: the Palestinian people are deeply connected to the land of Palestine. You probably guessed the corollary. The Jewish people are deeply connected to the land of Israel. And now here's the 4th most excruciatingly difficult point of all. The historical borders of the land of Israel and the historical borders of the land of Palestine are more or less the same borders. From the river to the sea is all Palestine. And from the same river to the same sea is all Israel. That's not a political statement, that's a statement of history and of identity. The land has 2 identities. The Holy Land, Mother Earth, has given birth to 2 children, the Jews and the Palestinians, 2 siblings. And those 2 siblings are fighting over who is the real child of that mother. And I believe that mother has 2 legitimate children. Land of Palestine, land of Israel, it's the exact same land. And that's really hard for me to say. And I understand it's really, really hard to admit that my land is also their land, and their land is also my land. But there's no other way. And now the last 3 points. Number 1, our initiative, Roots, the Israeli-Palestinian Grassroots Initiative for Understanding Nonviolence and Transformation, works exclusively in the West Bank, Judea, and Samaria. There's lots of other peace organizations doing fantastic work. with Israelis within the Green Line, within Israel proper. But almost no one is willing to talk to the settlers because the settlers are the bad actors, the settlers are the problem, so we can't talk to them. Root says the exact opposite. If you think the settlers are the problem, then you have to talk to them. The peace movement has to engage the bad actors. And today, especially since October 7th, Roots is, as far as I know, the only organization that has lines of communication with, again, the people that you might call, and I call as well, in parentheses, my neighbors, the bad actors. The people who have to be touched by the stories that I've been telling for the past half an hour. Number 2, religion. Religion is at the heart of the problem. That means, I'll put it on the table, Islam is a problem and Judaism is a problem. I have seen in my own lifetime how texts that once were marginal within the Jewish tradition in the past 40, 30, 20 years have been brought to the fore and have become mainstream. Texts of racism, texts of hate, texts of murder. And the same thing on the side of the Muslims. There are texts that during the course of this conflict have become mainstream. There are texts that are causing Jews to kill Muslims and are causing Muslims to kill Jews. And therefore, we in Roots say that if religion is at the heart of the problem, then religion has to be part of the solution, has to be at the heart of the solution. Most peace organizations, which are doing great work, but they say that religion is a problem, so let's sweep it under the rug. Let's ignore it. It's bad. And Root says, if that's what you believe, if you think religion is part of the problem, and it is, then it must be part of the solution. That means interfaith dialogue between believing Muslims and observant Jews is at the center of the work we do. And interfaith dialogue does not mean love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, it's all beautiful. It's not all beautiful, and love your neighbor as yourself doesn't help at all. We put on the table the negative text, the problematic text, and we find the ways to own them and then to repent for them, to reinterpret them, to bring other texts to the fore. Our tradition and the Islamic tradition as well is very rich, and you can find some bad stuff there, and you can find some good stuff there. And the question is, which Judaism and which Islam is going to win? And I believe, to a large degree, the answer to that question is the answer to the question of, will we continue, Jews and Palestinians, to kill each other or to live in peace and reconciliation? Third point. The third point is settlements. You heard me say that Roots believes deeply that the whole land from the river to the sea is Palestine, and that means that Palestinians should have the right to live wherever they want in the land, whether it's the state of Israel or the West Bank. And at the same time, you heard me say that Roots believes that the whole land from the river to the sea is historical Israel, and that means that Jews, Israelis, should have the right to live wherever they want in the whole land, including Judea and Samaria, but not at the expense of the Palestinian people. And the settlement movement that I've been part of for 40 years is definitely, without a doubt, coming at the expense of the Palestinian people. The settlement movement today is about building rights for me and not for Noor. It's about freedom of movement for me and not from Noor. It's about economic advancement for me and not for Noor. That is unacceptable. And again, Root says if the settlements are the problem, then the settlements have to become part of the solution. The work we do is with the settlers, that was number one, with Judaism and Islam, that's number two, and within the settlements. My neighbors, I believe, my Jewish neighbors and my Palestinian neighbors have to have their eyes opened to the existence of the other side, the humanity of the other side, the connection to the land of the other side. It's about recognition, it's about empathy. It's about respect. It's about acceptance. I'm going to close with one sentence. We in Roots believe that we are establishing, we are laying down the human groundwork for a future political peace settlement of dignity, of equality, of freedom, of human rights and security for both sides in that little sliver of land that we both call home. Thank you.
That's it, that's it.
That one. Oh.
Did I put the microphone there?
مرحبا، اسمي خالد أبو عواد من قرية بيت عمر فلسطين.
שלום, אני הדסה פרומן מתקוע, אשתו של הרב מנחם פרומן, זיכרונו לברכה.
My name is Nadine, I am from Bethlehem.
Shalom, my name is Shaul, I live in Tekoa.
Hi, I'm Bilal, I'm from Pitoma.
My name is Rabbi Hanan Schlesinger, and I live in Alon Shvut.
4 years ago, here in our family land, Roots start. Roots is a partnership between people from both sides. People who believe in non-violence, dignity and quality between our people. Dignity for me is when you respect the other one, when you give him the space for his life, when you respect his opinion, his culture. This is the dignity. And it's very important for us, the Middle East people. We try here to give another picture to the people in order to increase the hope inside them.
We work in many different directions, but one of the core things that happens here is the people-to-people work.
Nobody could imagine a space where Israeli and Palestinian youth from the West Bank could meet each other and work together on building a better future. This cannot happen without friendship, without love for each other, and to have fun together.
In all my life, before I come to youth group, I only went once to Israel or to beach. It was very emotional to go with each other because I never imagined that I would go to beach with an Israelis, you know.
All of these programs engage with our local communities, bringing people who are a little bit afraid to come and came for the first time and then saw something that surprised them and became involved.
אנחנו פה עומדים כולנו בכאב גדול, והשאלה איך גורמים לזה שזה לא יהיה עוד פעם ולא נעמוד פה באותו בכי.
It was so important when Roots went to Lezion Junction, you know, to protest against the violence in Douma. And both Palestinians and Israelis should condemn violence and should stand with each other against violence and should show the people, the world, and also the extremists on both sides that there are Palestinians who are against violence and they are protesting and they are saying no violence in my name, and also Israelis who are saying the same thing.
We expand our circles in many ways. I travel and speak all over Israel, in the radio, in the television, and a lot of meeting with young people. People are thirsty to hear what we are doing. They don't believe the dream of peace. peace can become real.
Roots Network today includes representatives from 28 different Israeli and Palestinian towns in this area, this local area.
Roots has created a miracle, an expanding island of sanity, a veritable Garden of Eden, in a land full with so much ignorance of the other, prejudice, stereotypes, and fear. We are beginning to bring a little bit of healing, deep recognition of the other's belonging to this land, preparing the ground for a future of coexistence, human rights, dignity, and mutual recognition. We need your help. We ask you to join us and join the thousands of people around the globe who are supporting Roots. Instead of exporting the Palestinian-Israeli conflict to the four corners of the globe, help us to export recognition and respect. Thank you very much.
Hello everyone. Hi. It's nice to be here. We have talked about this to be in Maine. This is our first presentation in Maine, right? I'm saying this is our... Is this? Can you hear me? Yeah. So, okay. Okay. My name is Noor Awad, and I live in Bethlehem. And I want to share with you the story, my story, of who I am and how I end up joining Roots. So here is it. I was born in Amman, Jordan in 1991. I was born in Jordan, but I'm not a Jordanian. And I wasn't supposed to be born there, but I was born there. Now, why was I born in Jordan? To answer that question, really, we have to go back to 1948. In 1948, my family, my grandparents, on both sides of the family, they used to live in a village called Malha. That's our village, that's where the family belongs to. And really, the family lived there for a long, long time. Malha is southwest of Jerusalem. That's where it's located. The area is still called Malha until today. Some of the houses of the village still stay there today. My grandparents, both of them were born in Malha. Now, at some point, Malha became one of the important villages in the area of west of Jerusalem. And that was during the late of the Ottoman era when the railway between Jaffa and Jerusalem was established. So that gave the village many privileges or many things. One of them is the access, the ability to travel, to go to Jaffa, to go to the port, to export things. It helped the village in so many ways. Malha was one of the few villages that actually had already like a high school, a theater, a football club. And as I mentioned, my grandparents were born there. They grew up there. They got married. And that all until 1948. In April 1948, the situation around Malha was getting tougher and tougher and more difficult. The Jewish forces were attacking some of the villages. The Haganah and the Stern attacked a neighboring village of ours called Deir Yassin and committed a massacre there. People were killed. And because of that, the people of my village, when Malha was attacked later, were forced out. They had to run away to a refugee camp. The United Nations was just establishing these refugee camps for Palestinian refugees. And that was in the area of Bethlehem. About 3 miles away, my grandparents ended up in this refugee camp, and they hoped that this will be for a short time. meaning that at some point these attacks will stop and they will be safe to go back to their home, to their village. But that wasn't for a short time. It took a year and a half for the war to end. And then, after a ceasefire agreement was made between Jordan and the new established state, Israel, and they draw the green line, the ceasefire line, no Palestinian refugee was allowed to go back. So now my grandparents are in this refugee camp in Bethlehem, but my grandfather didn't want to stay in the refugee camp, so that's why he took the family and he found a house, a place in the old city of Bethlehem. My parents were born in Bethlehem, and that was before, during the Jordanian occupation. They grew up there after 1967 under the Israeli occupation. Now, in 1980, my father decided to leave out of frustration that he will not have a future, he will not have a normal life. So that's why he wanted to leave Palestine, and his plan was to go to Europe. He didn't make it to Europe, but he just stayed in Jordan, and my mother moved there, they got married, so that's why I was born there, and not in Bethlehem, and not in Malha. In 1995, something different happened in this story that I'm sharing with you. In 1995, we were in the middle of the Oslo peace process. And for the first time, after several decades of fights and wars and occupation, now they are talking about peace. They are talking about putting an end to the conflict, putting an end to the occupation, and soon a Palestinian state in the West Bank and Gaza. That gave a lot of hope to my parents. And because of that hope, they felt that this is the right moment for them to come back and finally be able to live a normal life in our country. So this is when my family moved back. I was very young. I was only 4 years when that happened. And I barely will remember anything. Like, I have very few memories from that time. But I want to share with you how I feel about it and what I actually remember. And I'm talking about the years between 1995 and the year 2000, those 5 years. So to me, it felt like it was a normal life as a young kid. My father used to work in Jerusalem. He used to drive to go to his work in Jerusalem. That's something illegal today to do today. No one can drive from the West Bank to go to Jerusalem with a Palestinian car. We used to go to Jaffa, to Haifa, if we want, to Akka. So that's are the few memories that I have that I remember. But I'm not saying that in those 5 years, between 1995 and 2000, peace prevailed in the land, and we succeeded, and now we're just like the occupation is gone, and we both people are living in peace. Of course, that wasn't the reality. I was too young to understand the complexity of the situation around me. But the situation continued to deteriorate in many ways, and we come to the year 2000 and the failure of the peace process. And that failure of the peace process left many people with big disappointment. People were promised that this will be the end of occupation, the end of the conflict, the end of suffering, and it did not happen. And at the same time, we still have the violence, we still have the soldiers, we still have settlers. And because of that, the second intifada started. The second Palestinian uprising started as a result of the failure of the Oslo peace process. So I grew up during this time. The year 2002, Bethlehem was under siege and fighting. The Israeli army is cracking down on the Palestinian Authority and Palestinian security forces and Hamas. And now I find myself in the middle of a war zone. As at 12, 13 years old, I open my eyes to this new reality, a much violent reality. And I understand that this is not a normal life. And as much as I want to be away from this situation, as much as I try to be away from it, it's really hard to be away because I'm in the middle of it. People are being killed, people are sent to jail. In our house where we lived, just a little bit to the northeast of Bethlehem, Israel have just built a new settlement in that area, and there is a military camp next to it. And every night there will be an exchange of fire between the Israeli army and Palestinian forces, and the bullets will hit our house. My room was exposed, and every night you can see the bullets coming in through the window, so we would all sleep as a family in the room that's least exposed to the other side. So I'm trying to say that as much as you can try to be away from this violence, it comes to you. I grew up with this reality, and I felt so frustrated with this situation. I felt so angry because I was old enough to understand that this is not a normal life. And now I am asking myself, what should I do about it? And before I answer this question, because of the anger that I feel about this situation, I of course, normally I blame the people who are creating it, the people who created and continue to create this situation, the people who are responsible for it. And when I think about who to blame, I begin by blaming the enemy side for what they did to us and what they continue to do. I blame the Israelis. And then I can blame my side. I blame the older generation, maybe. I'll say in their time, they didn't take enough responsibility. I might blame the leadership on our side. But after I'm done with all of the blaming, to be honest with you, I come to the point to say, but this is now the situation I am dealing with. As a 15 years old, this is the reality, this is the situation that I am dealing with. So what should I do about it? And it felt there is nothing really I can do. And maybe the best idea and the best thing I can do is to just run away. Get out from there. You know, I don't have to continue my life in this situation, and I can just like leave and go somewhere else. When I was growing up in this reality, I also felt that I was so unlucky because I didn't choose this. It was enforced on me in a way or another. The fact that I was born with this identity, that I was born as a Palestinian, and my parents brought me to live in Palestine, that I have to live in this situation. So it seems like I've figured it out. I made an answer that I should just like leave and leave it behind me, go somewhere else, find a new life, and move on in my life and have a better future. That wasn't the only idea in my head, because at the same time, I was thinking that yes, I want to run away from it, but this is not really, I didn't see it as a solution, or wasn't really satisfying to me, to be honest. Because at the same time, I do go back to ask myself, how can I blame people for not doing anything, and I blame the old generation, and yet I want to run away from the situation? It might be a solution to me, but it will not be a solution for the next generations. So I start to feel that I have to think about what can I do. Now, if you grew up in the West Bank like me, in this reality, in this situation, it doesn't take you long to understand and to realize that the number one reason that makes our life complicated there, that takes our political rights, our collective rights, our individual human rights, is the fact that we live under occupation. We live under the control of another nation, not our nation, and we have no saying in our destiny. We cannot decide about almost anything in this reality. So it becomes clear to every Palestinian in this condition that this occupation should end, must end. And it's not a unique situation that we only, the Palestinians, are finding ourselves in. It's not like the only people who are occupied are the Palestinian people. There are so many nations around the world who have lived or live under occupation. They were oppressed by another nation, by another group of people. And usually how nations respond is by resisting the occupation, fighting for their freedom, for their liberty, fighting for their independence. And that's what we need to do. So I start to see this as the answer, obviously. If I want to do anything about the situation there while I'm living there, is by taking responsibility and fighting the occupation. And this is not just only me, Noor. This is something that everyone in my generation should be and must be doing. But when I say I want to fight the occupation, how can I do that? I think that I need to find the most effective way to do it. And when I say I want to fight, I mean literally I want to fight. With violence, without violence. That means that I might get myself paying a price, a big price, in order to fight the occupation. It means that I might get myself killed in this process of liberation of my people. But at some point, even at that age, I have to make the decision that I'm willing to pay my life as the price for the freedom and dignity of the future generations. That's my reality, a little bit about my reality. That's the conditions and the situation I grew up with. And for the sake of time, I want to take you and move with you 10 years fast forward from that. So I was talking about when we were 2006, the end of the Second Intifada, and now we are in 2016. And I want to tell you the story, how I found about Roots and why I joined. And how could it be that I am talking to Israelis and Israeli settlers in the West Bank today? So in 2016, I was guiding a group of American students. They were coming from here, from the States, from several universities. They are actually part of a program that's called Middle East Studies. And what they do on this program, that they study about the Middle East, of course, and they focus on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. And part of their program is that they come on this trip for almost 2 weeks to Israel and Palestine, and they tour around and meet with people and learn about the country. Now, why I'm guiding them? Because this is my job. I became a tour guide at some point in 2014, and I started to guide groups. If you don't know, or if you know, I will share with you anyway. By 2019, we had almost 3.5 million tourists coming to our region, to Israel and Palestine, to the country. It was increasing in the last couple of years before the pandemic. And the vast majority of those tourists, what I call them tourists, are actually Christian pilgrims who are coming to see the Holy Land. And the fact that I live in Bethlehem, I was so lucky, and that gave me an access to meet with internationals, to meet with foreigners, to meet with tourists. Very often, in my experience, the tourists I'm meeting with and the people who I met with have already met people from the Israeli side, and they have already heard about the country and its history from an Israeli perspective, but very rarely from the Palestinian one. So I became a tour guide in order to meet people and tell them the story of my land and what we are living there. So I start to focus on groups actually that want to learn more about the reality. They want to see the holy places, the holy stones, but they also want to see the people of the Holy Land. And I became what we call back there a geopolitical tour guide. So I take these kind of groups. In 2016, I was hired to guide a group of, as I mentioned, those American students who are coming to learn about the reality on the ground. They finished the first part of the tour, meaning they had their Israeli guide, and they went to Tel Aviv, they went to the north of the country, south. At some point, they come to Jerusalem. And now, on the Palestinian side, going to East Jerusalem, Ramallah, Bethlehem, other places, I have only one day with them. And my job was to take them to the city of Hebron, south of the West Bank, south from where I live. So we go, and we begin in the morning, and we drive together now toward Hebron. On the way, I'm talking about what the things that the groups are seeing, the roads, the checkpoints, the different areas there, Area A, Area C, what does it mean? The daily life experience of living and going through these checkpoints and going to deal with the military. What does it mean to live under occupation? The groups are asking more questions, two-state solution, new facts on the ground, what's happening with that. And at some point, we arrive in Hebron. And there, I talk about the history of the city. We go to the old city of Hebron. And I talk about the last 100 years. And I focus a lot on the last 30 years of what's happening, showing them around. And at some point, we have lunch for the group. And the lunch will take place at someone's house. It will not go to a restaurant, but intentionally, we organize this lunch to be at someone's house, so that this family will actually host us, and the group gets the chance to have lunch and also talk to the members of the family. The family shared with us. They talked about their life living in the old city of Hebron, about soldiers coming at night, going to the rooftop, searching the house for a reason, for no reason, using their house for different purposes, about settler attacks. So by the end of that day and by the end of that meeting, that the group knows a little bit more about the daily life of Palestinians in the West Bank and what does it mean to live under occupation. Before we finish our meeting and leave Hebron and go back to Bethlehem, where the group is staying, we still have one more meeting. And that meeting is supposed to be with an Israeli settler who's going to talk to the group to convey the Israeli settler's perspective. This was something that I had never done before. I was asked to do it, and for logistic reasons, the group is there in the West Bank, and they want to discover or explore this perspective. Now, I thought about it. Is it right for me to do it, or is it not right? I thought that I can bring them there to the meeting. As I show them the reality and I explain to them what's going on the ground, I'm not worried that this is something wrong I'm doing if I'm taking them to the meeting. But now, how can I take them to a meeting inside the settlement where I can't go in? And I'm not allowed. So I thought about it, and it sounded like the most practical way of doing it. I'll just coordinate with this guy that we are going to meet with him at the entrance of the settlement. I hand over the group to him, where the soldiers and the guards are, and I wait outside in one of the Palestinian shops, and after an hour and a half, the group comes back, and that's how we are going to do it. So I called him, we talked over the phone about it, and he said that he wants me to join and to be part of it. So now me and him are starting to think where that can be, because there is no place we can legally sit together in this situation. So he finally suggested that we go to the Cave of the Patriarchs, to the Ibrahimi Mosque. But even there, the place is divided. It's controlled by the Israeli army, and it's divided to two sections. One is Muslim and one is Jewish. On the Muslim-Palestinian side, only Palestinians and tourists will be allowed. And on the Jewish side, only Israelis, Israeli Jews, and tourists will be allowed. And there are checkpoints in the middle. So I can't go to the Jewish side where he wanted us to go. So I said this, and he said, don't worry, I know some of the soldiers down at the checkpoint. We can walk together. What you need to do, just walk between the group members, so the soldiers will not see you. And that's how you smuggle yourself on the other side of the checkpoint. Now, I did it, not because so much I trusted him, but because I felt, one, I'm curious. I live there, and I'm a tour guide, and I never had the chance to see the holy place, the holy site, from the other angle, from the other view, from the Jewish side. But two, I also felt that, if he's taking it upon himself, and he's a settler, he's part of the system, if the soldiers find out, he needs to deal with it. And I didn't feel I will be in so much trouble. So I did what he said, and it worked out. The soldiers did not see me. It was a large group, 40 students. We walked together, and now we are on the other side of the checkpoint. We go to sit, and he wanted to talk to us. The Israeli army and the Israeli police have set up a police station there in that area, in the middle of Hebron, and he have a gun with him, so he needed, according to the regulations, to go hand over the gun before he enters the mosque or the holy place, the Cave of the Patriarchs. So we now are sitting and listening to him. And very much like what I am doing, he was sharing us the story of his life. So I'll quote a little bit from the things that he said and tell you how that affected me. So he introduced himself, and he said that he was born here in the US, and he grew up as an American Jewish citizen with all rights. He was making sure to make the group understand that his decision to leave this country and move thousands of miles away to the land over there wasn't because that he couldn't live here anymore, of any social or economic pressures, but because the way how he described it, that's how he's fulfilling his Jewish identity. The fact that he wants to live on that land there, that's how he's fulfilling his identity. And so immediately, as a Palestinian, I understand that of course, he's giving us a Zionist talk. He's a Jewish Zionist person, and he believes in the Zionist ideology that all Jewish people have the right to go and live on that land. And I wasn't expecting something else, but I'm just listening, and I am thinking about what he's telling us. It felt to me that he felt strongly entitled to do what he's doing. Just to put you in my shoes, I'm thinking about this guy. I'm not thinking about his religion at all for any second. I'm thinking about his nationality. He's American. He's the same American like the students I'm guiding. And he thinks that he have the right to do what he's doing. He then talks more about it. And he talks about the situation, about the reality on the ground. So he started to describe it in about two things. One, he said, there is no occupation. There is no occupation. There is no such thing. And I didn't really understood what he's talking about right now. Got me a bit confused. So then he elaborated and explained furthermore, but the more he talked, the more it didn't really make any sense. What he's saying. And to me, I couldn't really listen when he was talking anymore, because the volume in my head, the voice I'm talking to myself, was getting louder and louder. What he mean by there's no occupation? I'm thinking about the situation, and I'm thinking about it from a legal and political aspect. Doesn't he know that, in the West Bank here, we live under Israeli military law, like officially we are under the army control, under the army law, the martial law, and that we are not citizens of Israel, and there is no way that we can become citizens of Israel legally. And we are not also citizens of Palestine. There is no state of Palestine that exists. There is the Palestinian Authority since 1993, but it's not independent state. And the Palestinian Authority does not control airspace or borders, barely controls some areas in the West Bank. So what he's talking about, he's saying no occupation. It didn't just make any sense. It felt like so confusing, like denying the reality in the most obvious thing. And the second point he made to explain the reality to the group was when he said, there is no Palestinian people. So now the group is a little bit confused. If there is no occupation, there is no Palestinian people, what this conflict is about, like what's the conflict? And he explains more, but to be honest with you, his second point was much more I was more familiar with it. It's not like that the first time I hear something like this, that there is no Palestinian people and we are just only Arabs. And I thought, of course he will say something like this, because to me as a Palestinian, the first things I learn about the other side and about the conflict and about what's going on and about Zionism is that the Zionist pioneers said from the beginning in the 19th century that a land without people for a people without land. Meaning the land is empty, the Jewish people are in exile, and they should go back to the land that it's empty. So from the very beginning of the conflict, they were denying our mere existence. And if you are interested, that line, that sentence I said, actually originates in evangelical Christianity. Evangelical Christianity, that's what we call it. There's another term for it here, no? In the US, you use another different term to it. But that's where it came from originally, like. However, so he said those two things, and to me, it was nothing but a complete denial of reality, of identity, and it was so problematic, so frustrating for me to be sitting there and listening to him, because I felt that according to him, I'm being completely denied. The circumstances and the situation, legally and politically, that I live under are being denied by him, and my identity is being denied, and I felt that I was left with nothing. And this sense of denial was so strong, what even make it more problematic, I would say, that he made decisions based on these convictions that he have, based on the way that he sees the situation there. And this is not about reading somewhere like an article or something or a book about it. It's meeting a person who he made his life decision about these things. That's how problematic I felt it was. Now the group got what they want. They explored a settler perspective. They asked questions. They asked some hard questions. We got into an argument at the end about something. And then the time is finished, the time is up, and now I have to take the group and drive back to Bethlehem. On the way back, I'm thinking about this encounter that I just had and the sense of denial, the strong sense of denial that I was left with. And it struck me at that moment that this settler that we just met with is the first Israeli that I actually met with in my life. Now, someone can say, what do you mean, the first Israeli? I mean that until this point, 2016, 25 years old, the only Israelis I have actually met and encountered were the soldiers at the checkpoints. When I meet soldiers at the checkpoints, we don't have dialogue. They give me orders, show ID. When they come to arrest people in Bethlehem, when they shoot and kill people, that's how I meet the other side. That's how I meet the Israelis, as soldiers, 100% of the time. Of course, the settlers in the West Bank, we see them on the bus, on their buses, on the bus stations, surrounded by the soldiers, guarded by the soldiers. We don't talk. We don't have the same language. We don't talk. We are afraid of them. They are afraid of us, obviously. But to realize that this was the first Israeli that I talked with, it made me say, this was the first Israeli that I talked with and the last one. I don't want to talk to any one of them after this. Now, I was meeting with Rabbi Hanan at the same day. It wasn't so clear to me. I thought that I'm bringing my group to one last meeting near Gush Etzion, halfway between Bethlehem and Hebron, and that Rabbi Hanan is a settler from Alon Shvut, and I thought that the idea was that we are meeting with him as a settler who's living there. But honestly, I felt it was weird. Why like two settlers in the same day? I took my phone out, I called one of the people I work with, and I asked him, Saeed, you just like explain this to me, I still don't get it. Like the first meeting I understand in Hebron, but the second meeting, what is that about? And then Saeed goes to tell me that this is not just a meeting with Hanan as a settler, but there is a group there. There is an organization called Roots. And I asked, okay, what they are doing? And he said there are Palestinians involved. So what they are doing? And he said they are talking about peace. That sounded like the most ridiculous, and the most dangerous and the most suspicious thing that I can hear in my context, in my reality. So now I want to go to this place that's called Roots, Shurashim, not because I so much looking forward to meet with the Israelis, but to really meet with the Palestinians and to tell them, what are you doing? So we get there, and Ali, who was supposed to meet with us, wasn't there. It was only Rabbi Hanan. It was in February 2016, was a cold day. It started to rain outside. We sat in a plastic house. That was the thing that was available then. We sat there, and Rabbi Hanan talked to us. We had some chairs, like plastic chairs. We brought them, the group brought them, we sat, and then he started to tell us about his story, the story that he shared with you tonight, and this organization. In the very first 10 minutes, it was really hard for me to stay sitting there and listening to the things that he's saying. Because again, talking about 2,000 years of history, 3,000 years of connection to the land and all of that, and all of these things that he's talking about himself as a Zionist and as a settler, and explaining those things and make it sound like rational and romantic. And I felt so frustrated. I said like, okay, this is the end of the day. I'm tired already. Why I need to listen to this again? We have a bus driver who's sitting outside alone. Maybe I should just like go sit with him. But I didn't do that. I didn't leave. I didn't leave for several reasons. One of them, I felt that even though I was really tired and it was really hard for me to listen to what he's saying, I felt it was too early to judge. It's too early for me to just like give up and leave. Maybe he will say something, one word, that actually reflects the truth of the reality of what's going on. And the other reason why I didn't leave, because I felt also it wasn't really the right thing for me to do, since I'm the guide of the group and I have to do with my job and I have to do many things, but I have to sit to be there. So I stayed there, and I'm listening to Rabbi Hanan. And then Rabbi Hanan started to tell us one story after the other about his realization that we exist, that there is another side here, that the land has another name, that there is another story, that there is another situation parallelly going to the situation that he's also experiencing. And one story after the other, and I felt this was very challenging because it was totally unexpected. The way how he talked about the situation, the way how he described it, the stories about meeting Jamal and his family and how that affected him, the stories of meeting Ali. Rabbi Hanan said at some point in that presentation that he wasn't sure anymore about like who he is, what he's doing there, if his identity is true at all. And I felt that was really so brave to come to this point of really sharing with us this struggle, of realizing that there is another side exists, and even go to question what you took for granted for all of your life and your own identity. We finished the meeting, we go back to the bus, and we start to drive, and most of the group is asking me one question. All of them ask me one question. What do you think about the meeting that we just had? And I really didn't know what to answer at the beginning. Now for the group, I understood it was really a very confusing meeting, and it was very, very contradicting. How it be that Rabbi Hanan is a settler in the West Bank and talks about the occupation? How is it be that he's a settler and he's a Zionist that talks about a Palestinian people and talks about another nation and talks about Palestine? So for them it was contradicting, obviously. But to me, I didn't have this sense of contradiction. I didn't leave with contradiction after I met with Rabbi Hanan. The thing that I actually felt immediately was this sense of recognition and empathy. Recognition that's combined with empathy. Okay, I'll explain what I mean. Very rarely, Palestinians and Israelis meet each other with recognition and empathy. To be able to recognize that the other side is also legitimate, and to feel empathy with the other side, that doesn't happen very much where we come from. I felt it strongly in the words of Rabbi Hanan. It affected me. And I started to think more and more about it. And I felt I have to think about it. I think at that moment, when you feel that you met someone from the other side, from the enemy side, that talks so much in recognition and empathy of your side, I felt there's two ways of dealing with it. The first way is to just ignore it and run away from it. I would run away from it by saying, okay, you met one person who's like nice, but don't forget, I'm sure that most of his people, most of his side are not like him, and they are like the first settler that you met with, the first one. That's the way of running away from it. The second thing, the second way of dealing with it was that I have to accept that I met someone that I can talk with, someone that I felt potentially can be a partner, someone I felt strongly like I can talk with and I can listen to. And the things that Rabbi Hanan said with so much recognition and empathy made me later think about the things that he said about his own side. Now, several days after, I'm thinking about this encounter, and Rabbi Hanan told me, he invited me to come back to Roots. It wasn't something that just like easy to decide to go back to Gush Etzion in Area C, near the junction where all of the settlers and the soldiers are there, and there's a piece of Palestinian land. I didn't feel like it was easy to decide to go there, and to this idea of like this organization of Roots. Rabbi Hanan came one day, drive close to Bethlehem, still in Area C. We met, we talked, and I went back to Roots. Now, when I went back to Roots, the next time I actually met with Ali, and I heard from his story and from his perspective. It was equally effective, I would say, and even inspiring. The things that he went through, his life, his experience, his family, and the work that he is doing right now. And I'll tell you that, obviously, I joined the work. It didn't take me long to feel that I have to join this work. But I want to explain to you why I felt that I need to join this work. If you go back to the middle of my story, when I was talking about myself as a teenager, and that sense of responsibility that I feel strongly to change the reality, and to fight for freedom, and to fight for the end of occupation, all of a sudden, I felt that I found a group of people who see how this reality is, and are willing to work to change it together. This is something that I never thought about in this way. Now, of course, I heard about Israeli-Palestinian peace organizations. It wasn't completely something like new to me. I've heard about it. You know, since the Oslo agreements were signed, and we have these kind of organizations, but they are, to say the least, ineffective in my experience. As a Palestinian growing up during the Second Intifada in the West Bank, they are ineffective. They produce nothing. On a much worse level, I would say, like Jamal said to Hanan, or to his friend who was going to Jericho, those people are doing these things. I'm not really sure why they are doing them. They are weak in their identity. They go and allow themselves to sit with their enemy and to give legitimacy to the enemy. So that's how I was thinking about it. But what changed now is that I held back my judgments. I held back my ideas. And I opened myself to listen to the stories and the experiences of the Roots activists and Roots leaders. I found myself joining, as I said, because I found that this is a way of challenging and changing the reality. But it changed the way how I think about this, because now, for the first time, I start to think about two sides, and not only one side. And I start to have a vision of how the reality should change, because so much of that reality that I was envisioning was without them. But as Rabbi Hanan said, there is a sense of delusion that we will be there without them, or they will be there without us. So, to me, this is a way of taking responsibility. Living in the land, the work we are doing, is a way of taking responsibility. Very often people try to describe the work we are doing as a work of coexistence. And it's not really accurate what we are trying to do there. We are not trying to coexist with the situation. I would prefer to describe it as co-resistance. But we are resisting a reality that we both acknowledge that this is not a sustainable and good and moral reality for both of our peoples on that land. To come to this recognition, it wasn't easy. It wasn't, overnight. I accept that the other side belongs to the land as much as I do. It took me a long time. But what allowed that is that for the first time, when I met Rabbi Hanan, I met someone from the other side who talked about his identity and about his people connection to the land without using it or weaponizing it against me and my identity and my connection to the land. Only then, in that fashion, I was able to listen and feel the empathy and later feel also much more recognition. So here we are, two peoples in one land, And the last thing I want to say, the core of the philosophy of this group is reconciliation, meaning that we believe that if peace will ever happen between the Israelis and Palestinians, the political agreement as a sign of it is required, it's good, but the work between the people is what will actually have this agreement of peace to last. Meaning that the both sides need to have this reconciliation for peace to become a reality. But at the same time, we are in a crucial need, the last 11 months last year, for the political work that we are missing. We are working on the ground for several years now, but we also at the same time need the work on the diplomatic and the political level. I'll stop here. This is my story, and that's how I joined Roots, and I hope that we can hear questions and have some answers to your questions. Thank you for listening.
First, I want to say thank you to both of you for your travels, for your words, for your work. And I want to repeat something that Rav Hanan said, because I wrote it down as one of my favorite Roots quotes, is that we have to listen until it hurts and then listen some more. And it does hurt sometimes, but that's when we have to listen that much more. We do want to open the floor for a few questions. We have a microphone down here. We have a microphone up at the top. If they're both full, we'll just go between the two of them. And we just ask that in order to get to as many questions as we can, that you keep it to a question and try to keep those questions as short as possible. So if you have a question, we invite you to the microphone.
Rabbi, is it hard to live in the West Bank around the Palestinian people?
Question was, is it hard to live in the West Bank among the Palestinian people? It's a hard question to answer because there's so many different levels here. Today, it's hard for me to live in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria because I see that my presence there, although on the one hand it's part of my historical right, on the other hand it's within the framework of a political and social reality that is unjust. And that causes me great pain that it exists and that I'm part of it.
I've heard that kids that go to Seeds for Peace are treated very badly when they go home, sometimes with violence, they're beat up and stuff like that. And I wonder how people that are members of your organization are treated by others.
Are you talking about Israelis or Palestinians or both?
Both.
This is the first time I've heard something like that. It's certainly true, I'm talking now on the Israeli side, that the high school kids who are part of our youth movement, Israeli and Palestinian youth movement, the Israeli high school kids are part of our movement in many cases, perhaps even in most, against the wishes of their parents, their teachers, and their rabbis, and their peers. And those who stick it out for the whole year, and it's usually just about everyone sticks it out, it means they find themselves in deep disagreements with their surroundings, but on the basis of their personal experience that they meet Palestinians who turn out to be human beings, they tell their teachers and their rabbis and their parents that, with all due respect, you don't know what you're talking about, because I've met them, and they're not what you think.
Talking about roots, the structure of the Palestinian participation at Roots is so much family-based. There is a lot families who actually join the organization, join our activities. So when kids actually participate, they have the support from their families. But what they don't have is the understanding or the support from the rest of the community or the school or teachers. That people also oppose what they are doing. And when they share about it, it's met with resistance, with the rejection. That's how it is. But the youth group are all there with the support of their parents, or at least one of their parents. But as I said, the family is involved in this, and they have a trust in us, and they send. But general participation is met by ostracizing, people actually. Also you have to know where do you share about this, when do you share, when the right time to talk about it. That was my experience as well for the last 8, almost 9 years.
I saw on your slideshow that you speak with Israelis before military service. Can you talk about that a little?
Yeah.
What's the question?
The question is our work with Israelis before military service. So in Israel, of course, after high school, kids go to the army, and I think it's about 20% of Israeli high school graduates that don't go immediately to the army, but take a year off, a gap year program in American terms, and these are called pre-military academies. It's a misnomer because it's not military, but it's before they go into the army, so it's called pre-military. And about 40 to 50 of these academies bring their young people to us every year for a 3 or 4 hour program. They hear from an Israeli speaker, hear from a Palestinian speaker, and in many cases they also hear from 2 or 3 Palestinian alumni of our youth movement who are basically the same age as the Israelis in the pre-military academies. This is really a very important part of our work. Of course, these young Israeli kids, in 99% of the cases, have never met a Palestinian. And about 90% of the cases, they've never met a religious Jew in any serious sense. And now they're meeting a religious Jew and a Palestinian talking together in the same room and showing great respect and even agreement one with the other. So it's quite transformational. We have many, many, many stories of these amazing transformations that have happened just from this 3 or 4 hour program. Just tell a very short story. Ali tells us that once, this is 5, 6 years ago, he went to the local supermarket to buy something. This is a supermarket that is an Israeli supermarket, but it's not in settlement, so that technically Palestinians can go there, although they're deathly afraid to, but Ali's not afraid because he knows Israelis and he speaks Hebrew. So Ali goes in his car to the supermarket, and the soldiers see it's a Palestinian car, so they immediately approach him and ask him for his ID. Ali is searching around in his backpack. Uh-oh, he forgot his ID. What is he going to do? And then Ali sees in a distance that one of the officers of the soldiers is running towards Ali and the soldiers. Ali's really afraid what's going to happen. The officer comes right up to Ali and says, "Ma shlomcha, Ali? How are you, Ali?" Ali says, "How do you know my name?" And he says, "You talked to my academy 3 years ago and you changed my life." Oh, wait, there was a question.
I know you already touched on this. This question is for both of you, but what does Zionism mean to you, to each of you?
Zionism. It's a very, I think the question is what does it mean for me? But the environment, where I come from and the environment that I live, such a word is very, very triggering and means really a lot of bad things. Now, it's to me, I'm holding both things at the same time. Zionism was, in a way, the reason for why my family lost their home, the reason for why I can't live and access 78% of my homeland. It's still today the ideology that's fueling, taking over the West Bank and the conflict that we are living. It's talking about the Jewish nation and their aspiration to have control over the land. Then it turns into something even much more problematic when we talk about Jewish supremacy and what's happening there in the land. At the same time, with all of that, the work of Roots made me understand that Zionism is Jewish nationalism, that the Jewish people also see themselves as a people, feel this way. They identify as people, and that I would say something that's crazy. Like at some point, crazy to people on my side. At some point, I started to relate to Zionism like Palestinianism, just national movement. But at the same time, holding like the complex reality that its effect on us wasn't liberation at all, wasn't something positive. Until today, it doesn't really play any positive thing to the Palestinians. It actually made very negative things to the Palestinian side, Zionism. And one of the things that I've challenged with, and I still have challenged in this work, is like for Palestinians to accept it, like to accept Zionism, the way we understand it, means to accept and legitimize everything bad that was done against us. So I have this ability to hold both things at the same time. I can maintain it, but it's very difficult, it's not easy to maintain it all the time. And I hope that we come to a point of reconciliation when a true peace can happen, where you can actually find a way to recognize both sides. Now, so much of the language and Roots, just to clarify this level, and so much of why it interested me, is that a lot of the Roots leadership and activists are talking about like recognizing what Zionism have caused to the Palestinians and talking about how do you actually live, how do you change Zionism in a way? How do you change your identity? Not by abandoning your identity. But the same thing on the Palestinian side. How do I change my identity to reshape it or recreate it in a way that allows for the other identity to exist, that allows to make a room for it, to accept it. So that's what it means to me. Two things at the same time, that's very hard to hold, contradicts, but that's how I feel about it.
Before Roots, I was a passionate Zionist. And today I'm a conflicted Zionist. Zionism changed my life. Had it not been for Zionism, I would have become a successful doctor in America. And instead I moved to Israel at the age of 18 and I became a settler. So clearly Zionism has been the most meaningful, positive, organizing ideology that I'd ever known. And through the work of Roots, through my exposure to Palestinians and their reality, I've seen that Zionism is complicated. That in addition to being the national liberation movement of the Jewish people, which it is, in addition to returning us home after 2,000 years of exile and providing us with security and meaning, etc., 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 it also has a dark side. That my national liberation and the meaning of my life, that means my wife and my family and my children and my house, have come at the expense of other people. And I think that I have to own that, have to be aware of it, and I have to reconfigure my Zionism, my understanding of Zionism, so that it will continue to be the national liberation of the movement of the Jewish people. It will not be a movement that erases and denies the peoplehood and the dignity and the rights of the Palestinian people. That's really complicated. And that actually is the work of Roots. One of our leaders in Roots is Rabbanit Hadassah Fruman, who is the widow of Rabbi Menachem Fruman. Rabbi Menachem Fruman was you can say, the spiritual founder of Roots. We were founded a year after he passed away. He passed away now 11 years ago, 11 and a half. Many of the founders of Roots, not me, but others, are students of his, former students. And Hadassah, his widow, is one of the original founders of Hadassah, says that we have to now move Zionism to the second level. We have to, now that we've ensured the creation and the existence of the Jewish state, we have to now move towards a Zionism that also works for the good of the Palestinian people. Because ultimately, if the Palestinian people, if we don't work together with them for their good, it's not going to be good, not for them and not for us. I see there's a question in the back, and then we'll come here. Sorry about that.
My question is, where are the Bedouins and the Israeli Arabs in this awful situation?
Nor, did you hear the question?
The question was, where are the Bedouins and the Israeli Arabs in this awful situation? So Rabbi Hanan talked, and he talked about like how the work of Roots is exclusively in the West Bank, and that's true. The main focus of the work of Roots is in the West Bank because there are so many, not so many, but like there are many organizations that have the dialogue and bring the dialogue between Israeli citizens from Israel, from Tel Aviv, from other areas, and Palestinians from the West Bank. But there is almost no organization that do the work we are doing for several reasons. So that's why our main focus is in the West Bank. Now, of course, that doesn't mean that what we are trying to do is only a solution in the West Bank between settlers and Palestinians. This is like one of the misunderstanding, very common misunderstanding about Roots. And even something I would think delegitimize the mission of Roots, because if this was about creating coexistence between settlers and Palestinians, then this is, as most of my people are saying, this is definitely normalization, and it's wrong morally and politically and on so many levels. So to answer really your question, they have a part, but it's also very interesting that you refer to the Bedouins and Israeli Arabs, because to me they are not like a separate group. The thing is that because of the circumstances, the different circumstances that we live, and the Israeli government so much uses a language that try to, as much as it can, to fraction and divide the Palestinian people into categories, into different people. But at the end of the day, we are the same people. Now, of course, every person has his or her own connection, or much connection to Palestinian identity, to Israeli Jewish identity, to Zionism, to Palestinianism. But I think that one of the roles that I see for Palestinians who are citizens of Israel and or Israeli Arabs is to be the bridge sometimes between the two sides, to be the ones who can like help us bridge the gap. And that's a positive role that they can actually play, but at the same time, they have their own, or they are living in this situation where they are citizens of the state of Israel, but they are Palestinians. And there is all the time the two conflicted identities, because in reality they are conflicted. We are living in a conflict. You can just imagine how they feel in the last 11 months, being Israeli citizens, at the same time dealing with what's happening in Gaza and in the West Bank and in East Jerusalem, and even at some point in some of the Palestinian cities or inside Israel and in the Arab villages and cities over there. So I see that there is a positive role that they can play. But at the same time, they are struggling because of the situation with being integrated or not integrated in the Israeli society, how to express their identity, how to feel connection to one side or the other, or feel connection to both sides, which is something it's unusual to happen this way, and it's not, the current circumstances doesn't really allow it so much, doesn't welcome it. It's so strange when a Palestinian 48 or an Israeli citizen says like, I feel both Israeli and Palestinian at the same time. It's not strange for me, but it's strange in the reality for our communities and the way how they are being treated. So the answer is, I think they can play a positive role to bridge the gap. And what we are looking for here, we didn't say actually, and no one asked us yet, okay, so what's your vision? How do you want to resolve this conflict? And it's not like I'm bringing another question to just keep talking, but just because it's connected to this point, we have a vision as Roots, but we have a certain, me and Rabbi Hanan at least, we are members of another organization that's called a land for all, or two states, one homeland. I prefer the old name. Two states, one homeland. And they talk about a confederation model where there is two states, a Palestinian state and Israeli state for both people, but at the same time have a confederation model that allow people to live on the entire land regardless what passport, what citizenship they carry. There is a way about like the borders and Jerusalem and settlers and refugees and security. And the Palestinians or citizens of Israel, they play, of course, they are part of this vision, and they should be part of any vision of peace, any political vision of peace.
We're going to take one more question, the gentleman at the microphone there. But just before the last question, I want to say that Roots has a monthly mailing list, a newsletter. We'd love for you to join the mailing list. So clipboards are going around asking for your name and your email address. And we also have a QR code that you can take a picture of in order to join the mailing list in that fashion. So yes, the last question.
Well, quickly, I want to thank you, gentlemen, for this very enlightening evening. But I do have a question, and the question is Roots being recognized by the government of Israel, and are you having an ongoing dialogue with leadership in the state of Israel?
So we're recognized by the Israeli government in the sense that we are a registered NGO, a registered nonprofit. Our work is not on the national political level, so we do have connections to a small number of members of Knesset, but that's not our focus. Our greater focus is local, and we have strong connections to local politicians. That means leaders of the local government, rabbis, religious leaders, and educational and community leaders. We work with them behind the scenes, sometimes openly, to advance Palestinian rights as much as possible within the framework of an unjust system.
For this Israeli government, the last thing they want is an organization like us. And even you can say without exaggeration that in the next couple of months, if the existence of such organization was threatened, it will not be surprising, like to me. The existence of joint Palestinian-Israeli government as joint Israeli-Palestinian initiatives, there is of course the legal part, but there is the political part. And I think the more we have influence, the more we will be challenged. We experience this even in our work. Like even, I agree, as Rabbi Hanan said, we always have been after, and we still, like medium-level politicians. We don't go after national-level politicians. So the mayor of the settlements around us, Palestinian mayors of Palestinian villages and towns, the head of the army in the area, because that's part of the activism to connect to these people in charge. And sometimes even, we get a mayor that, don't want to talk to us. Or we have someone in the army, an officer in charge who don't want to talk to us. So it's not always for granted that we actually get to the people in authority. And again, going back to government, the more impact that Roots will have, I don't think that the government will allow it even to continue to exist. And I think in the future, without exaggeration, there will be like a serious risk or a serious threat on the future of all Israeli-Palestinian organizations. Yeah.
We're going to close by showing you 4 slides that try to answer the question, after hearing us speak tonight, what can you do? If you'd like to take a picture of the slides with your camera phone, that's of course a good idea. So sign up for a monthly newsletter. Visit our website, friendsofroots.net. Also on Facebook or on Instagram, on LinkedIn, you can connect to us. Please, we ask you to donate to our work. Without your resources, we cannot continue the work. And what it says down there, and invite us to other synagogues, invite us to universities, invite us to churches and to mosques and to federations. We've spoken in about 100 universities during the past 10 years, 100 synagogues, 50 churches, and we want to continue to spread the word. You can arrange a Zoom presentation for a synagogue or a church or a mosque or a community group. You can form a local Friends of Roots affinity group in your community. We have the beginnings of them in other communities. People can get together once a month and communicate with us by Zoom or read a book and hear our input on the book, etc. A Palestinian memoir, an Israeli memoir. Of course, you can connect us to people of means and influence in order to spread the word and raise more money. My own personal website has some material that's too edgy for the Roots website, so you can go there, ravchanan.org. And you can volunteer for the board of the American Friends of Roots. We have in America a group of 12, 13 Jews, Christians, and Muslims that meets once a month by Zoom and once a year in person. They govern us, they help us out with fiduciary responsibility, they give us insight, business advice, and of course they help with fundraising and spreading the word. So if you have experience, if you're a lawyer or a business person or have been on the board of the federation or of a synagogue and you might be interested, can turn to us. We have a campus affiliate called Atidna. We're on about 11 or 12 campuses right now. If you'd like to form a chapter at a local university, there's the QR code. You can be, okay, we won't talk about that. You can intern, go back. You can intern with us on the ground. And here's something really important. Social media. You can do what most of the people do, which is spread the bad news. You hear something about what the other side has done to us, whoever us is, and you want the world to know how they're all against us. My advice is to let other people spread the bad news. Don't worry, they'll do it. What if all the people that Noor and I talked to in all the synagogues and churches and mosques and universities, what if they all took upon themselves only to spread the good news? The good news of dialogue, the good news of understanding, the good news of listening until it hurts. Whether it's good news locally of Jews and Christians or Jews and Muslims who are talking to each other, who have cordial relationships, or it's the work that we do, spreading that word. And by the way, you can get the word not just on our website, but there are another 140, even 150 organizations doing work similar to what Roots does. We're the only ones doing it in the West Bank, Judea and Samaria, but there's another 150 doing it within Israel. And these groups are organized in something called the Forum of Israeli Peace NGOs. There's another group called ALMEP, the Alliance for Middle East Peace. There's Amal Tikva that brings together, again, more of these organizations. There is good news out there. And if we spread the good news, that creates hope. When people have hope, they take responsibility. When people don't have hope, they don't take responsibility. So by spreading the good news, you can actually galvanize your friends and relatives and acquaintances to do something to create a better future. The last slide, that's the last slide. There's a screening, there's a movie about us. You saw the trailer, it's called The Field, you can screen it. When you visit Israel or Palestine, you can visit Israel and Palestine. See the other side, meet the other side, experience the other side's reality. Encourage your family, friends, house of worship to learn the narrative of, to empathize with, and to support both Israelis and Palestinians. If you're learning Hebrew, learn Arabic. Reach out to the other, of course. Thank you. We're going to, yes.
I just want to say one last thing. And I agree with Rabbi Hanan a lot about the idea that we should spread the hope because it exists, and when people feel hopeful, they feel more obligated or committed that this can be changed and can do something. And I feel there is actions and there are hope that we can talk about. Yet at the same time, in what's happening for the last year, for the last 11 months, I think that it's more crucial than ever. Donating money is good and crucial for our survival as organizations there and to go back to our activities and to do even more activities right now. But if you do really care about Israel or Palestine or both, and that's what I prefer, that people actually care for both sides and care for solutions rather than one side or the other, it's very important to take much more steps because we need that. I've said in a way, I hinted in the end of my talk, that the philosophy of our work of creating reconciliation. How do you want to create a reconciliation at the same time the conflict is going and the people are experiencing trauma on both sides? Because that can be undone at the same time you're trying to do this reconciliation. So for this work to succeed, more than ever, we need now intervention. We have intervention in this conflict from outside all the time, but it's a negative one. We need positive intervention. I've said several times on this tour, like already, the government of this country is badly and negatively intervening in the conflict and actually investing in the conflict, not in the solution. It's not the only one, there are other players, but that should be said. And I think that people who really care about us and care about the situation over there have even more responsibility now. One of the things you can do, keep in touch with us. Keep in touch if you know an Israeli peace activist or Palestinian peace activist, just keep in touch with them, check on them, ask them how you can help. Without this political diplomatic intervention, a positive one, it will be very hard, because I cannot promise anyone here that if we go back home, continue this work, in 1 year or 10 years or 5 years, we are going to fix it. We can't do it on our own. We need the help from people outside. Money and resources are important, but we are at a point where we need a crucial political intervention, diplomatic intervention that's positive, that's focusing towards solutions, real solutions, and not continuing the conflict and continuing the conflict. Thank you.
My last sentence, thank you. I promise this is my last sentence. If you came here tonight as a strong supporter of Israel, we hope you leave as a strong supporter of Israel. And at the same time, if you came here tonight as a strong supporter of Palestine, we hope you leave as a strong supporter of Palestine. We need you to support both sides. Because if Israel does not get what it needs, wants, and deserves, the Palestinians will not get what they need, want, and deserve. And if the Palestinians do not get what they need, want, and deserve, Israel will never get what it needs, wants, and deserves. And therefore, it's pro-Israel and at the same time pro-Palestine. That's the only way to be pro a better future for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Noor, and thank you, Rav Hanan, for this. I really appreciate it. I hope you guys were inspired by this program as I was, and I hope that you will take this message home with you and spread this message of hope. I just wanted to say that this program was created as a partnership between 3 organizations, and those are Temple Beth El, Congregation Bet Ha'am, and the JCA. So can we give them a round of applause, please, for their support? And lastly, if you feel so inspired to help support Roots and the wonderful work that they do, please find me. I've got a lovely QR code that'll take you right to their page to donate. And we also have a QR code at the front desk by where the registration took place. And also, please sign up for their newsletter to keep in touch with them and find out other ways that you can help support their wonderful work. Thank you. Small but scrappy.
Rabbi Hanan.
doing? I'm Jeremy. Nice to meet you. Oh,
So if I know, I will invite him. Invite all of you.
She'll be back. She'll be back in October.
Sweet. I am. Anything else for me? No problem. Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's awesome.